everybody, and welcome to our first Book of Boba Fett review. It is Chapter 1. We are reviewing Chapter 1 of the Book of Boba Fett. I believe it's called Stranger in a Strange Land, something like that. Yeah, we just finished watching it. It's like 1 in the morning, Pacific time. And we're going to talk about this episode because it's the day we've all been waiting for so long. Over a year since The Mandalorian Season 2 finished. And over a year since we got the announcement for this show as well, and we've been excited, very much so, to talk about this. Bad Batch was great, Visions was great, but this is really the one we've all been looking forward to for 2021, and it's really a 2022 show. So we're going to be talking about the Book of Boba Fett episode 1, but before we do so, hit that like button down below, subscribe to the channel for Star Wars content 3 days a week, and during the Book of Boba Fett, a lot more than 3 days a week. We'll be having Book of Boba Fett reviews on every Wednesday morning for you guys, like you are watching right now. And then we'll have our typical Monday, Wednesday, Friday videos on top of all that, as well as a prediction video for the Book of Boba Fett, the following chapter. So this week will be Chapter 2. We will be talking about that on Thursday. You'll check that video out tomorrow. So yeah, okay. So now to get into the Book of Boba Fett. This was an interesting start to this show. I think one of the things it does well, and one of the things it establishes, is it lays the foundation for how the show is going to be told, how the story is going to be told over the course of these 7 episodes, or at least the majority of these 7 episodes. And it looks like we are going to be having a lot of parallels between something that happens to Boba Fett in present day, or like present day for our show, and then something that happened to him in his past, and whether that is, like in this episode, all about how he gets out of the Sarlacc pit, what happens to him directly after the Sarlacc pit. The Jawas taking his armor. By the way, full spoilers, in case you guys didn't realize that already, but we're going to talk spoilers for this episode. The Jawas taking his armor, which aligns with the first episode of The Mandalorian Season 2, with Cobb Vanth finding it in the Sandcrawler. All that type of stuff. And I think for me, that was the most interesting part of this episode. We didn't really get too deep into his story in the like current Mandalorian timeline where he is when taking over for Jabba. That barely got started in this episode, and so I hope for a little bit more in Chapter 2. But I think for the flashback stuff, it was all pretty good. With the Sarlacc pit, which is the thing most people were really excited to see, I was always a little torn with what I wanted to see from the Sarlacc pit escape. One, it's like we know it's the prequel syndrome of like, we know he gets out, so how long do we want to spend on how he gets out? It is just like a gigantic animal in the shape of a pit. It's not like too crazy interesting to see him climb out. We don't get much though in this, and I think the Sarlacc pit was my only like, oh my god, there it is type moment. We're in the Sarlacc pit for this episode, but him escaping is about a total of probably a minute and a half, and he's just out. I would have liked to see a little bit like of how the anatomy of the Sarlacc works in this show, how it looks when he's climbing out, because we just get an interior shot basically of him setting the Sarlacc on fire, and then an exterior of him punching his way out into the sand. And I wanted a little bit more from that, but overall I dug a lot of the stuff with the Tusken Raiders. I thought all that's going to be interesting to see where he develops into the Boba Fett we know from episode 1 of season 2 of The Mandalorian and episode 6 of season 2 of The Mandalorian when he comes back. A lot of that stuff worked for me. And the setup worked. I don't think this is not like a crazy episode. I feel like if you're on the fence with the Book of Boba Fett, this one's not going to win you over. This is not like anything game changing. It's very much so like already an exposition episode, just kind of getting us in the groove of where we're going here. Kind of the dynamics of him as the new ruler on Tatooine. We do get confirmation he is in Mos Espa, which I did not expect, because I guess it makes sense because Jabba rules over Mos Espa when Anakin's there in episode 1, but I did not expect that to be Mos Espa, the town we keep seeing in the trailers at least. But yeah, and the fight scene I was mentioned to earlier, I felt like that was the biggest logic fallacy in the whole episode. It's he could have just flown over those guys and then like attacked them from behind. He gets encircled. That took some of that type of stuff took me out a little bit. The stormtrooper in the Sarlacc pit, like when the stormtroopers show up, like how deep is he? I wanted to see a little bit more of that type of fleshed out. It was kind of in favor of action or just like jumping 2 points. So overall, I didn't love this episode. I feel like it's on par with some of the weaker episodes of The Mandalorian. But I mean, it's here, and I'm excited for next week regardless. But anyway, what are your thoughts on this episode of Book of Boba Fett?
Yeah, I mean, some of the same thoughts that you're having. I like this episode, but in a way, it is a bit undercooked. And I think part of that is because we've kind of been set up in these first two episodes of the first two seasons of The Mandalorian to expect, like, oh, some big reveal is going to happen, right? Like, in the back of my mind, I was like, "Ugh, we're going to get some like hint at like Crimson Dawn or something. But, it's only 7 episodes, so I was expecting them to punch, right out of the gates immediately.
Yeah, to jump right in.
Right, right. And they didn't. Um, but at the same time, I'm actually not opposed to it. I think I, well, we're following with Din and Grogu. Like that was a very linear like story that once those two connected, it would only accelerate. And this is not really a story of like acceleration. Like, yes, he's gonna be fighting off different groups, different, you know, guilds of sorts, different cartels or whatnot. We don't know. I mean, I just realized like, yeah, because of what we read in the War of the Bounty Hunters, there are no huts anymore on Tatooine. So he is entering a power vacuum, but how much of this power vacuum was like properly cared for by Bib Fortuna? How much of that was just him engorging himself on diminishing assets and returns? We don't know. Yeah, I guess like you said, he could have, probably should have flown out of his jet with his jetpack in that fight. Maybe it's not functioning. Maybe I don't know. They try to make Fennec kind of jump out and get out of there. And he was definitely being targeted a bit more, and especially defending with, I guess, his van bracers. So I'm assuming the controls would be there. Maybe that's why he didn't really have a clear chance. I don't know. I'm not trying to reason like reason something that he should have been able to do, but outside of a flaw here and there, there was nothing bad about this episode. This just felt very strongly average. Um, if I would have preferred a little bit more time in the Sarlacc, but I actually did like how not unprocessed it was. I don't know. I feel like a lot of when I say unprocessed, I feel like a lot of Legends stories that have to deal with Sarlacc, they just make Boba just immediately more chaotic and amazing. Like he flies out with his he like has a mind meld with like the Sarlacc, and he convinces it to squeeze around his jetpack, which causes things to explode, and he can and then or his flamethrower, and then he can fly out with his jetpack, and it makes for an interesting and a very cool visual. But he's not like a superhero at the end of the day. He is just a really capable warrior who is dependent on his, technology. As much as he's very much more of a utilitarian guy than even his father was, he's still, he can't just fly out. He's not going to Superman his way out of this. So I thought it was pretty interesting that he there was like a very realistic, at least by sci-fi Star Wars standards, of like what would happen if you're, in the process of being digested by a star. Like, one, it takes some time. You're not in the belly immediately. You're not like in the pit of acid. You're kind of being worked your way constricted down. So it looks like maybe he's not all the way in, at least to me. Because we see that stormtrooper that he like punches his way to, gets the oxygen into his system, and then um yeah, he just punches his way out and burns his way out, and he comes out on the side of the Sarlacc. So I'm assuming, just based on the depth of like the angle he's coming from, maybe he just fell in. He just wasn't out of it per se. Like he wasn't deep. I don't know. This is an episode that I feel like I really need another rewatch to really have like my full position on. But I will say this. I think we're in a good position at the end of the day with this episode, because it very much felt like the very first episode of The Mandalorian, which when I watched, I really didn't like it. Not that I hated it or anything. I was like grateful, like wow, that we're getting streaming Star Wars TV shows live action. That's amazing. But none of it really worked for me other than the very ending with Grogu. This episode has doesn't have like that perfect cliffhanger or anything, but it does again feel a little undercooked, but at the very least, it feels very much like what I wanted from Boba Fett. It does feel like Tatooine. It feels very original trilogy in the flashbacks, and it's doing the great thing that the Mandalorian's done about like developing the Tusken Raider cultures and the subsets. Like this is a very different Tusken Raiders than we saw in season two's premiere. You know, they were in darker robes. They seem a little bit more less communal, more like outsiders, almost exiles, like more bound by even stricter and crazier um, beliefs and norms. Um, I'd say outside of that, the only thing that I didn't love was the creature fight. Just because the creature felt so kind of Pokemon-ish, kind of fantasy like in a way, and
I was thinking
it
like Goro from
yeah.
Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, right. It just it felt like one of those strange like early 2000s film like Scorpion King or something, like some sort of fight that was happening there. And the fight was good. The fight was really good. I liked, especially again, Tamora's killing it. He was absolutely killing it this whole episode. It just some of those elements feel okay, and the ones that are there are great, but just a little undercooked. So overall, I mean, it's a start. It's not anything that feels outstanding or makes me like go like, "Oh man, what's next? What's gonna happen?" But it's nice to see that the story structure's in place. That this is gonna be different than the Mandalorian. That this is more of a guy who is weakened, but presumably working his way up both psychologically, politically, criminally, and physically back into who he was and possibly something even greater than that.
Yeah, I'm with you on a lot of that. I think it is a start, and I think Mandalorian. I like Mandalorian's first episode. I think a little bit more, but it was now like looking back on it 2 seasons later, it's one of the weaker episodes for sure. And I think Book of Boba Fett is finding its footing. It does a really good job of establishing its world. I think in the context it's in right now, the state of Tatooine, specifically Mos Espa. I think we're going to see intercity politics, kind of as we did with this mayor's Domo who shows up, who's kind of, not really falling down and at Boba's feet. We're going to see that as like Bib Fortuna had the residuals of being a part of Jabba's palace and like being a part of that hierarchy and being Jabba's second in command for so long that I think even though he seems like kind of a doofus, he's like he had that already built-in respect, and we get to see that with the Gamorrean guards. So I think they did a good job in this episode of establishing what the political setup of the crime syndicates are going to be in this. Not really who our main players are yet, but I think I wanted a little bit more of that. I was expecting a little bit more of that in this episode, but we did get a nice setup for the world. I do like the continued fleshing out of the desert aspects of Tatooine, the way it looks and the way that we got to see another moisture farming homestead in this. Like we get to see a little bit more of what it looks like. It's not just a desert planet anymore. We've gotten to see multiple cities. We've got to see multiple civilizations. We get to see different types of Tusken Raiders, how it all works. The Jawas really in action, just with their scavenging and all of that. Like this, I think all of that type of stuff. The world building was really unique in that sense, and it worked quite well in this. Also, I thought the creature effects. I didn't love the design of the creature, kind of like you, but I thought the creature effects were also really impressive. You can tell that creature was a lot of practical, especially on all the close-ups, and it looked
Hmm.
really, really good.
Right. Right.
Even the Tusken Raider, I forgot what the name of the dogs are, the Tusken dogs, but
Yeah.
those looked really good too in close-ups. So you could tell they used a lot of practical when they could. All the Tusken Raider costume designing was really good. The way Mos Espa looked. The Twi'leks, I think, have looked a little weird in Mandalorian sometimes. This time they looked really good. Same with the Rodian. So there were a lot of really good creature designs. I think that's going to be important when you're going into the underworld. We already talked about the um, Trandoshans in our trailer reaction and stuff. That still looked good in the one shot we saw here. Uh, but also to touch on a point you were making at the beginning of when you were talking earlier, I think we have a right to be expecting a little bit more from this episode. I think especially with that interview last week or 2 weeks ago that I talked about on on the channel for one of our news videos, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's only the first 10 minutes of the first episode is all you've seen." Well,
Yeah,
there's plenty of
yeah,
shots we haven't seen where he's talking to a lot of different people. Maybe it's the first 2 episodes that we is all we've seen, but there's plenty of stuff we have seen that wasn't in this episode, or there was plenty of
yeah.
dialogue that was in this episode that was paired in different scenes. So
Yeah,
um,
Robert Rodriguez told a bit of a white lie there. There's a
yeah,
lot of it, but the hammerhead who's presumably the mayor's not
right,
there. The girl on the speeder bike with the prosthetic arms not there. We don't see the gang all flying
yeah,
about. We don't see Bobo with his gun entering. Like
no.
he's he's at
We
least
don't
what
see
we've
that
seen.
like crime syndicate
Yeah,
table with like him as like the
right.
Godfather, like
We
um,
don't see him like strong right yet. Right now we see him as like a guy who's got good banter. I think another thing, Fennec and him had great banter,
mhm,
and Fennec's fighting scenes and going after the Red Guards, and then keeping Boba's promise, like the promise that Boba made, like alive, but also just like saying, I only need one of you anyways, so just kicking the other guy after. It's a nice like taste of like, yes, we're gonna see this guy who's traumatized, who's working through all these different things, but he's also not like the heroic, honor bound guy that we kind of felt like Mando 2 was setting up. Like, don't worry, him and Fennec are still like anti-heroes. They're definitely like still got, more mischievous, more darker elements to their sides. Um, there was a lot of great cameos, like the Max Rebo band was in there, in the Twi'leks,
that was in my
uh
video, my top 10 characters that should be in the Bad Batch, or I mean, Book
Yeah,
of Boba Fett season 2.
exactly.
Finally
That and
got, I got one.
I didn't expect it immediately, right? We also got that droid. I don't know if it's the same droid that was
Yeah,
it's not the same
88.
88, right? I don't know if it's not the same one that's burning the droid
It
Gonk
looks,
droid's feet,
it
but it's
looks like
something
him.
else,
Yeah,
yeah. But we got the world like fleshed so far. But I mean, there's also a lot that a lot of the TV spots have been hinting at like Tashi Station and like, well, what are those things gonna happen? And he is wearing the jumpsuit still, so I'm assuming that. Yeah, I mean, we're gonna see his present day story. I feel like rapidly escalate in the next episode as it comes, but we done a lot of like the flashback and setup stuff for Boba's, immediately post Return of the Jedi stuff. So I think the combination of both will balance out a bit more come into the next episode. So we'll see maybe him, becoming a bit more ingrained with the Tusken Raiders. Because by the end, he's without his chains. The Rodian guy is dead. He was an asshole for no reason. Boba offered to cut off his chains and everything. I don't know, just a silly dude. But yeah, he got this little kid, this Tusken kid, the head that he wanted, and and he got the water shelled, like the fruit things that are buried in the sand. He got that water again. So yeah, I mean, this episode felt like Boba is gonna survive, and that's why in the flashbacks, that's why he's where he is now. But the present is like Boba has no idea what he's doing, and he's trying, but he's severely weakened, and he's got to work through so much of his physical trauma that, in a way, his mental trauma is tied to. So interesting way to start off. Just wish there was a bit more oomph to it, a little
yeah,
bit like what's gonna hook us into that next episode, because it was a short episode. It was only
yeah,
38 minutes.
yeah. It could have been longer.
Yeah. And there's plenty of stuff that we'd love to see Boba do, and yeah, I mean, hopefully, we still saw so many great things. I mean, the shot of him immediately as he enters into the flashbacks in the back to tank of Camino, I was just like, whoa, Camino looks really good. Like, I haven't seen Camino be that good ever. And then we got to see, I'm assuming, another kid play Daniel Logan's version of Boba Fett, and looking at the helmet at Geonosis of Jango Fett's helmet. Presumably without the head. I'm assuming when the head is cut off, the suction is disconnected and it just flew off. from Mace Windu beheading because that would just be so weird. I've seen enough memes of like the head plopping out. Um, but yeah, rich details. That's really all I can say. There's a lot of rich details, a bit of an imbalance of which story is the precedence. Is it the flashback story? Is it the main story? And clearly, there's a bit of an imbalance there. Some things that kind of like make you go, like couldn't he have done this or that? But and without the final hook, that also and being short, you're like, oh, is it great? No, it's not great, but I think it's good, and I think that's fine because I'm hoping it'll be like the next episode. Disney shows in general, either they've been had very solid first episodes, or some of the MCU first episodes have been like, is there anything great about it? But then they pick up, so I'm not really worried about the pickup issues here. I think we've gotten everything we needed to out of the way. We'll see more flashbacks, maybe even some stuff with pre-Return of the Jedi, but I think we're in a good position for these next 6 episodes to just carry with the present day story.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think the world building and everything Star Warsy was really strong here. The story didn't quite hit yet. I think it's a long game, and sometimes with TV, and sometimes when you have people who are newer to TV when they're storytelling, they might struggle to hit those notes per episode. It shouldn't have been the case with this. I think with Marvel, sometimes that excuse gets thrown around a bit more because they're new to it. John Favreau wrote this episode, so I feel like it should have progressed a little faster. It is interesting. I did not expect this much of the Mandalorian team to be a part of this. This is definitely like treated by Disney as Mandalorian 2.5, season 2.5, because it has, you see blatantly in the credits, you got Favreau, you got Filoni, you've got everybody there. And so it's going to hopefully reach that quality that the Mandalorian ultimately got to. Season one of the Mandalorian, it was a little slow to pick up. It had its interesting episodes, but it was like, where are we really going with this? I think because we don't really know what this story is going to be, it is hard to like distance yourself from like maybe an episode that just kind of ends and you're like, oh, that was it, like, and look towards the future. I think because we have seen a lot of shots, as I said earlier, but we don't really know where this is going. Like is there a plot outside of Boba Fett just trying to become the next big crime lord? Maybe that's just the plot, but I feel like there's got to be a little bit something more there, a little bit something more into him as a character. Who knows? We'll see. I think they did a good job with it's all like high quality Star Wars stuff. Definitely like looks better, feels more Star Warsy than the beginning of the Mandalorian did. It's creature design, everything looks really really good. It's really high quality. But the storytelling didn't quite nail it for me this time. But still good, and still will be looking forward to chapter 2. So thank you all so much for watching this review of the Book of Boba Fett chapter 1. We will be talking, as I said earlier, about the Book of Boba Fett chapter 2 tomorrow on our predictions and speculation videos. You can expect these on Thursdays. Similar format to how we did it for the Bad Batch. If you've been following our channel since then, we will be talking about what we think could happen in the next episode and maybe like further down into the season. So check that out tomorrow if you're interested in the next episode of the Book of Boba Fett. And then also stay tuned later today. We will be having comic reviews as usual on Wednesdays. And then stay tuned for Friday's video where we will be previewing everything Star Wars that we know right now that is coming in 2022. It will be a full 2022 preview of books, comics, TV shows, video games, anything that is supposed to come out in 2022 or is like TBD that we don't know if it's going to or not. We're going to be talking about it and giving you what we know now, all the information we know now about those projects. So you'll want to stick with Star Wars Lads for those videos this week and 3 videos a week every week like we do on our channel. So you're going to want to subscribe down below, hit the like button, comment below, let us know what you thought of this episode, and follow us on social media at Star Wars Lads on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And that's it. That's the episode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and stick around later today and tomorrow for more Book of Boba Fett content, and Star Wars Lads will be your place for all of that. So we'll see you next time.